Hi, this is Dr. Farley. In today's video here, I want to go over with you what happens inside the brain when we have an exaggerated stress response. Again, what we want to understand is that I categorize four types of stress. Mental emotional stress, acute, meaning short term, something just happened. Chemical stress, which is the number one stress, creating most trouble. Number three, physical stress. And number four, autosuggestion. And this is pathways that get hardwired in over a time frame. And then you have like a chronic autosuggestion, mental emotional stress pathway. So how does this happen? Well, the stress is first perceived and interpreted by the sympathetic nervous system. And then from there, which is part of the autonomic nervous system. And then from there, at the same time, we fire down the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis and releasing the cortisol and all of those things. So those are almost simultaneous, but the autonomics react first, and then the neuroendocrine, which is the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis, happens second. But I also want to go through other changes that happen. There's three other changes that happen. So 5 total changes happen inside the brain that gets stressed out. And I want to be clear here again. The number one stress is not mental emotional stress. It is food immune. Meaning, I eat something, I create an antibody or an immune chemical response that spills right through the body into the brain instantaneously, and now I'm under a stress response, okay? And then the rest of these manifestations happen. So those are the first two things, and I have a separate video on those first two things. But the third thing that happens is the hippocampus, which is linked to memory and cognition, and this is how stress can create dementia and Alzheimer's down the road, because the area of the brain that gets impacted by stress is the hippocampus, and the hippocampus is what converts short-term into long-term memory, and the hippocampus also is where we break the stress response. So once this reaction goes, we have to have a braking system to turn it off. I joke with my kids all the time when they're on moving vehicles, whatever it may be, that most important about getting on a new motorcycle or a dune buggy or a electric skateboard is, how do you stop? You must have to know the ability to stop. Going is easy. Same thing with the stress response. It'll just run. You want to make sure that the hippocampus is working optimally to turn it off. So the hippocampus also is involved with memory and cognition. So I run tests in here where we can start to say, hey, you're showing some cognitive deficits. It's also implicated in the negative feedback regulation of the HPA stress axis, which means it hardwires it in more and more, more and more, more and more, more and more. And now we're running this auto-suggestion. Now we're running this stress loop more and more and more. The fourth part of the brain that gets impacted by stress is the amygdala. The amygdala is responsible for fear conditioning and emotional processing, with outputs to the autonomic and neuroendocrine regulatory system. So now we get hardwired for fear and emotional processing issues, and we could have other mood disturbances. We could be showing signs of bipolar, whatever it may be. And fear can also be called anxiety. Fear can also be shown as anger. These are all signs that the system is in a stressed out system. And the more you run it, the more it runs. It doesn't stop until someone jumps in there and helps break the process. And then lastly is the prefrontal cortex, your executive functioning, which is involved in cognition and coping strategies and exerting a top-down control over subcortical structures. What does that mean? It means the ability to control your mind. It means the ability to think about the situation, not be immersed in the situation. It means the ability to choose, what are my thoughts right now, and not be buried and drowned in the emotional situation. So all of this over a time frame is supposed to be a short-term phenomenon, but it's not. And the longer you let it go, the more hardwired it becomes. The more hardwired it becomes, the more of these situations that we see. So the first perceived and interpreted threat triggers the sympathetic adrenal medullary system, and then the hypothalamic pituitary axis is activated right behind it within minutes. And then we see changes in the hippocampus, which is involved with memory and cognition, and also hardwiring it in more and more. We see changes in the amygdala, which is responsible for fear and anxiety and anger and emotional processing. And then lastly, it impacts the prefrontal cortex, which is involved in your ability to make executive decisions, to make good decisions, to not be caught up by your emotions, to be proactive and not reactive in your life to situations, to not be always flying off the handle. So this is what happens inside of your brain, and if we don't correct this, and we don't go to doctors that recognize this, which none of the doctors that I talk to recognize this, then you will change and reset your allostatic stress load, and this becomes worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. And this drives all diseases, mentally and physically. So thanks. If you have any questions, please let us know. God bless you. God bless your family, and God bless the United States. Thanks.